Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Road 96. I played on the PS5, it's also available on the PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC. I think it actually came out on PC last year, but now it's on the consoles. So we will start with the story. You play as a nameless hitchhiking teen, and your goal is to get to the border and basically flee the country of Petria. Now it's kind of a gameplay thing, but you don't play as just one teen, you actually play as multiple teens, a new one per every episode, and there's like 7 episodes I believe. And at first it kind of threw me off, I didn't really get it, and I wasn't necessarily enjoying it. It was somewhere during the second episode that it hit me, and at first it just didn't necessarily click. I understood it, but it didn't click. The game is not about your character. Your character is actually a vehicle for the stories of all the other characters. Your character and your story doesn't really matter. Like I said, at first I didn't get it, but once I did, I actually started to enjoy the story a lot more. But to explain it a bit better, Petria is in a state of turmoil, and they don't really explain why the teens are fleeing. There are hints to what happens to teens that are trying to flee, but they don't explain why these teens are fleeing. You just are, and it's more of a plot device to get you injected into these other characters' stories. There's an election coming, you're in like a totalitarian state, there's revolutionaries, so there's a lot going on and you get to, be alongside these characters. Now let's move on to the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is I really love the soundtrack to this game. I was really into the music. I was honestly a little surprised how much I enjoyed the music, but I really did enjoy the music. Now this isn't a big AAA title, so the sound effects are fairly limited, but I do think they do a good job injecting the sound effects and using them well. Although admittedly some of them are fairly generic. Like when you're hitchhiking, every time you get into a vehicle, they all sound like the exact same vehicle. You really don't know what vehicle you are in until the next scene starts. So there is some limitation there, but I think they use them well. As for the voiceover work, it's varying. At no point in time do I think any of it is like mind-shatteringly good. And at its worst, there's like this narration at times that sounds like it's being done by that shitty robo lady from TikTok. But for the most part, I think the voiceover work does well enough. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a first-person interactive narrative. And for you, everything happens basically during or in between the traveling. There are long sections of traveling that basically get skipped over, the boring stuff essentially, and you'll wind up at a gas station and you'll have to help somebody there, or you run into one of the other characters that's robbing a bank or some shit. And in that situation, it's a lot of selecting your dialogue, a lot of poking around, finding different items, money, food, resting to restore your energy, etc. And that's one thing that everything does, not quite everything, but every travel-based decision you make will cost you energy. And if you run out of energy, you will get arrested. And I gotta say, honestly, I think all of that worked very well. I actually really enjoyed the way the storytelling worked. Each of those interactive moments when you're exploring an area, when you're in a vehicle, when you're participating in a conversation, it progresses the story of a specific character. And you're not going to complete every single character's story arc in one run. Fortunately, there is a New Game Plus mode where you will then get to complete character stories. There's not an insane level of depth to the gameplay mechanics, but I do enjoy them, and they are what they are. They are there to progress the narrative. This isn't one of those games where it's driven by the gameplay. Now let's get into the controls, and honestly I don't have any major complaints with the controls. I think my biggest complaint regarding the controls would be the fact that when you're selecting dialogue, you have to do the whole cursor on the screen thing using a thumbstick, and that doesn't always work great when your character's walking, or when the character you are trying to talk to is walking, because they're moving, so it's moving, and you're trying to select the right answer, and it's weird and just doesn't work quite as well as it could. But otherwise, I actually feel the controls work very well. I felt they were responsive. I didn't have any issues with the camera or moving or anything like that. Then last but not least, let's get into the visuals. And I gotta say, I really like the art style in this game. I was actually really impressed with the visual style. It has that cel-shaded, cartoony look. Everything looks kind of like out of a watercolor painting or something along those lines. But it's bright, it's beautiful. I think they do a great job with the coloring. I think they did a really interesting job with the character designs. I mean, they are all a bit stereotypical, but I think they work very well, and I really liked it. I like the world they built around what's going on. I think visually they did a great job capturing pretty much everything. Only complaint I have with the visuals is some of the animation is a little, not amazing. Yeah, just some of the animation, some of the movements, some of the walking just does not look as good as it could, but it's fine overall. It's not something that's going to rip you straight out of the game and just take your mind completely away from everything going on. The only visual thing that I wish I could explain and understand was there was one point where I was like looking across the lake and it looked like there was like this isolated thunderstorm, except for it was basically on the ground. And I don't know if it was a glitch. I don't know what it was, but I really wish I knew what it was. Okay, so to wrap this up, we all know by now I like interactive narratives. And I gotta say, at first I was struggling to get into this one until it clicked in my brain that, I'm not the main character. The individual I am playing is completely nameless, and they're that way so that they can be kind of a blank slate for you to be a vehicle for the story, which is kind of a weird situation. Now, that all being said, I did enjoy the game, and I think it worked well overall. I'm not necessarily as in love with the story as I have been other games, but it definitely was enjoyable. It's also not a crazy expensive game, so for people who like interactive narratives, I definitely recommend this game. For people who aren't into them, this isn't the game, in my opinion anyways, that's going to convert you to a fan. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, have you ever picked up a hitchhiker? Not really my thing, man. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.